People were coming from all over. We started selling pizza to the local university before Domino's delivered, selling 300 pizzas a night. Eventually, my father built a reception hall in the back because the community needed a place for weddings, and that sat about 350 people and was booked every weekend.
The retention part of it is my favorite because I think that's where you get great business, you exponentially grow, and you feel really good about what you're doing.
And Jim's like fixed on this picture behind Grumpy, and he's like, "So what do you do?" And Jim's like, I build ships." He said, "What do you mean you build ships?" He said, "I build ships. I build partnerships, and I build relationships."
Thank you for joining me for the next 30 to 45 minutes on our show, especially if you're a sales leader, an entrepreneur, or a founder of the company. The person that's about to come on the channel has been in corporate America for the last 20 years, handling sales and sales leadership positions. She's been a business coach for the last 18 years, where Fortune 500 companies and startups combined have used her material, and thousands of other companies have used her online platform, the Sales Vault, to revamp, to enhance their skills, sales, and leadership. HubSpot has named her book, Race to Amazing, Your Fast Track to Sales Leadership, as one of the top 20 must reads if you are a sales manager. And Top Sales World has named her blog, Krista's Corner, as one of the top sales blogs, in the top 50 sales blogs out there. It's my utmost pleasure to bring on our channel today, Krista Moore.
Hey there.
Hey, Krista, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good, good, good. So I want to start with, Race to Amazing is the book that I've kind of heard a lot about while researching about you. And every time I'm like Krista Moore, it's like Race to Amazing, Race to Amazing, Race to Amazing. So I really want to know, what is Race to Amazing?
That's great. No, I love the title. A friend of mine, when I was writing it, like, what's the title? What do we call this? And it just came to us, and it's like, that's it. But it's about a personal development course, and it is getting on the fast track to winning. And the best way that I can describe that is, I was thrown into sales management when I didn't know what I was doing. I was a pretty good salesperson, so they made me a manager. But I had no idea what it would take to be a successful sales leader. So I learned the hard way. And by writing the book, it's my give back to those that might have gone from sales to management or didn't go to management school, but it will help you get on the fast track to sales success. And it really is kind of the fast track to sales leadership. It's helping you create a path, a process, a system, and not having to struggle with that. Just do it easier.
Wow. Well, you speak about, then it's a very important topic, because I believe that after training so many guys, uh, that it's very difficult to convert an individual who's great at sales into a sales leader,
Right.
because they've got their own style. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, an average salesperson makes a better leader because they have the patience and the listening skills to understand different people, right? And they were
I couldn't
average
agree
because
with you.
maybe they didn't push so much. I mean, when I say push, not in a bad way, but they were not aggressive, but they were like a little bit more calm. How do you, rate sales leadership as a skill? And can you talk about different personalities, and is there like a personality for sales leadership that some people will not make?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would agree with you 100% that not every salesperson is aligned to be an effective sales leader. And perhaps those that, as you described it, maybe a little softer or average might do better. And I understand what you mean by that. So as far as skills, there is an assessment in the book which is very helpful. We list, I think it's 13 like key sales leadership skills that you can self-diagnose yourself on to help you determine what areas do you need to work on throughout the book. So that helps you kind of get level set on that, because we have trained, coached, consulted thousands of sales leaders all over the world. So we're able to kind of collect what makes an effective sales leader, right? So this assessment is helpful to do some introspection for individuals. But I refer to something in the book called a coach approach, or sales leadership with a coach approach. And what that means is listening, understanding before you're reacting and responding. A coach approach, think about a sports team. They have a plan, they have a strategy, and they've got the best people on their team in the right positions. So there's a correlation between coaching and leadership, and that's how I like to look at skill set. And it's developing that, and often it comes natural for many people, but in most cases you do need to understand, what am I lacking and where do I need to develop?
So I'm now going to ask you a question which came to me while you were speaking, and it's a little drift away, but I'm going to bring it back to point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I find a lot of men under a lot of anxiety in the sales leadership role because it's always about numbers, numbers, numbers. And I've noticed a pattern that, I mean, we lose hair fast in sales leadership as men, uh, because it's as if you need to have that aggressive personality, like you got to be the rough and tough person. At the same time, every time I've seen a woman leader, and I'm talking only from a psychological perspective, it may speak about woman empowerment, but I'm more driven by the psychology behind placing people right. I think women have a place that they work from their heart naturally. And every time they've been in the leadership position, I found them to be calmer if they've got that, understanding of that particular position. And people, especially guys, listen to women more because they kind of respect them then in that position. I wanted to understand from you that have you noticed, what is the difference in a good sales leader versus an average sales leader, and is there something that you've noticed about men and women leading, and it's only from a perspective of some companies that it might just help them strategically to place leaders in place. It's a little off track,
Yeah,
but maybe
no,
it's
it's a great question. It's a great question. I think I need to give a little bit of a backdrop. I was one of the only female leaders. There was three in my position globally, and it was a company that had 30,000 employees. So I grew up in sales leadership in a highly male-dominated industry. So my only mentors really were male leaders. And I will tell you that I don't think I've ever worked for a female leader directly. I had kind of a dotted line report to a lady who was, a wonderful mentor for me as well. She gave me a lot of stretch assignments and helped me succeed in my role at Corporate Express. But I think there's a stereotype that comes with aggressive, strong male sales leaders. And, you know, maybe it was 20 years ago. I think that's changed a bit over the years. They could get away with more. I mean, I had this one guy that he would slam one time he slammed a paper tray, plastic paper tray. It went flying. People went running. I mean, he had like anger issues and got away with it. The CEO one time was in for a meeting, and I had to talk about the numbers. And there was this joke. It was, when he starts rocking, you better stop talking. And what that meant is, when he would get angry and he didn't like what he was hearing, he'd be rocking really fast in his chair, and then he would like explode, right? So it was the whole thing. If he starts rocking, you better stop talking. And I experienced that. And I've seen him, take his glasses off and throw them against the wall and get away with that. I just don't think that that type of behavior is as acceptable as it might have been in the past. And I think that companies like yours and mine and thousands of others that have really helped with leadership development courses and programs have made a difference over the long haul. So that's being said. As far as women and men in leadership, I think that there are certain traits, and there are studies that have shown that women can be softer, more emotional, and that could be good or bad. And I think it really depends on the individual, more on the gender.
Yeah, I think with the new generation, because my sister's working in Minnesota, and when you interact with younger people, you come to know what's the new trend, right? What's usually happening. And it all started with Facebook, but it really picked up with Instagram, or in the late 2000, early 2010 to 20, that period of
Yes.
time. This generation is socially driven because anything can catch fire online, right?
Mhm.
Very, very fast. It spreads globally. It does not spread, just nationally. I remember, sadly, when Kobe Bryant, suddenly passed away. uh, I knew it within 1 hour, and I was so shocked because I had listened to a lot of his interviews and I looked up to the guy, right? So I felt the emotion that people out there were feeling.
Yes.
I would have not, probably felt the same way if it weren't for social media. So the point being that because the generation is social driven, they need a heart. They look for the heart in a leader. And I think women have that. And I think that's why a lot of women leaders are coming up outside women empowerment, because that's what the calling is for the next
Yeah,
generation.
I
That's what they're
agree.
looking at. Yeah, it's a little different, but I think it's very important for organizations to understand, because how much time, Krista, do we spend hiring people, right? If you have a wrong sales leader, I mean, that's costing you a lot of money.
Mhm. I do see the difference between collaborating and being in a mastermind or a forum with women leaders opposed to male leaders. They are definitely more open, perhaps more honest, less guarded. Ego doesn't hang in the room as much as maybe other, in comparison. So I'm drawing from my own experience the comparisons between male and female leaders. And I started a nonprofit called Women in Leadership for an industry, just to mentor and grow and develop women leaders. And often they might leave or just not hang around with a particular company if there's not opportunity for them to continue to learn, develop, and grow.
Yeah, great. I think that sets the stage very, very well for us to get into some strategies. So now let's say we have a listener who's a male, a female, young, middle age, old, and we've got all these strategies in your book. If you had to pick two or three key strategies that people in today's world, including virtual leadership, can apply those strategies, establishing, starting from there, a team, and then growing that team online included, how would people do that? Of course, physical reality is there, but
Yeah.
virtual reality has also become a reality now.
All right, so there's two that are my favorite because I see them working every day. And I'm going to tell you a little story if that's okay. So I grew up in a small coal mining town in Western Pennsylvania. And you have to envision this. There's row houses, a company store, and a tavern. And the tavern's basically a dive bar. And we lived above it. And that's how I grew up for my childhood. So got early exposure to sales, right? And customer service and entrepreneurship at a very young age. But I remember a time when I would run through the bar to go to the bus stop. And there'd be coal miners in there because they just got off of work, and they would be in there. Their face would be all black. They'd have their hat on with their helmet with the light. I mean, it was the real deal. And my dad's back there, grilling up bacon and eggs for breakfast for them. And it's 7 o'clock. And that was a daily activity because they would come after work for a shot and a beer and breakfast. But one day when I was coming through, they weren't there, and it was kind of eerie and it was dark. And my dad was sitting in the corner booth by himself with his hand on his head, and he had been crying. And my dad's like a tough guy, like he doesn't cry. So I ran over to him. I'm like, Dad, what's wrong? And he said that the coal mine shut down and that we were going to have to sell Freddy's, which was the name of our restaurant. And I was like, no, we don't have to do that. We can make it. I don't know what I was being like his cheerleader at a very young age. And he took a paper placemat and turned it over. And we sat there and we drew 2 lines on that placemat. So it was 3 columns. And we had a brainstorming session at age 8 or 9. And he said, what can we do to bring in new customers? And we wrote all these great ideas down. The next column was, what can we do to sell more to those customers when they come in so that they spend more money once we have them here? And then the third column was, what can we do so that they come back? And that whole philosophy grew with me throughout my career and is in the book 50 years later, or maybe not, yeah, maybe 50 years later. And I refer to it as CPR, and it's growing your business with CPR. Any sales leader, from a strategy perspective, if you look at your customer base and you look at your industry and you ask those 3 questions, what's our strategy for bringing in new business? Clearly, tactically, what's our strategy for penetration? Conversion is the bringing in new business, converting customers, brand new customers from the competitors. Penetration is selling more to your existing accounts, whether it's services, making more money on them, bringing on an additional product category, whatever that might be. And retention is often forgotten, or we think we have great retention and we don't, which is selling more to those customers. So it's amazing how that philosophy stuck with me through my career, and I teach it today to many of my clients when it comes to building a go-to-market strategy. I mean, like 2 weeks from then, we had jazz music in the background at Freddy's Inn. Like, people were coming from all over. We started selling pizza to the local university before Domino's delivered, selling 300 pizzas a night. Eventually, my father built a reception hall in the back because the community needed a place for weddings, and that sat about 350 people and was booked every weekend. So we didn't go out of business. We put a strategy together and we executed on that. And it was basic, simple things. But business grew.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty big when you think about it 50 years ago, right? That is wow. How did you feel about it when your dad's business sustained and grew, and how did you feel?
I felt like I was a part of something bigger. I felt that I was part of a team, which is a strange way to look at it, but we were a family. But some of these ideas were mine, and
Hmm.
I felt like I was a part of something that was much bigger and a success story. And they did grow. I mean, the business grew to probably be the most popular wedding venue in Western Pennsylvania.
Wow. That's amazing. 8-year
Hmm.
old doing that, huh? With the dad.
And it's
It-
fun. It's funny though that we even are talking about this, because I speak and write a lot about your 10-year-old self,
yeah,
and I do
yeah, yeah.
programs and retreats around it, right? And I was doing sales strategy when I was that age. So, um, understandably, why it's my passion today.
That's amazing. Do you think that that strategy can also be used in building a team? If I'm a sales leader, I draw a plan with you and I say that, all right, what kind of sales guys do I need? Okay. Then I speak about how will I train them, how would I skill them, how would I coach them, and then how would I retain them in the culture. Do you think that same strategy would even work in
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. And we have used that same strategy for team building. And let me just give you an example of that. So, some companies, an individual sales representative will be responsible for the CP&R of their
Hmm.
customer base. And in some companies, it might be a sell and someone else services it. So, someone else might be responsible for the retention, but you've got hunters and farmers kind of in
Yeah,
terms of the types of sales role. So I think it's really understanding the individual's responsibility. Are they responsible for the CP&R, and do they have the skills for the CP&R? There are some sales reps that are great at retention, but they suck at getting in new business, right? So it is understanding your people, aligning their strengths to that model. And even if we came back to a company and said, here's your CPR strategy recommendation, they might say, oh, now we have to align the right people to execute these different strategies. And that is also a part of team building.
Okay, so let's, for the audience, right, define CPR again. So C is
Sure.
conversion.
C is conversion, P is penetration, and R is retention. And one way to remember this is grow your business with CPR, or breathe life into your business with CPR.
Got it. All right, fair enough. I had one more question in my mind while you were speaking about that,
Yeah,
which
and
is
you also had asked about a second strategy, so I don't want to
yes.
forget to share that with you, but please go with your question.
No, we can go ahead with the second strategy while the question comes back to me.
Yeah, so this strategy is in the book and very popular, and I do a lot of retreats and workshops around it today. And it's called shipbuilding. And this really applies to today's sales environment and corporate cultures, and starting to be more virtual and online and less in person from a sales standpoint, as well as sales leaders. So shipbuilding, I'm going to always have a story. Can I tell you a story?
Yes, of
Okay.
course.
So when I left corporate America, I left after 20 years of sales leadership and sales, and I started my own company. And I wanted to do coaching, consulting, and training because that's what I enjoyed the most. And I wanted to um, build businesses and build sales leadership in people because I never had that, right? And my first client was this guy that was a sales leader, and he had 20 sales reps. And he was not a good sales leader. His sales reps would not take him out on sales calls because all he did was talk, and they would be embarrassed by him. So he couldn't even get them to take them out on sales calls. Also, he had another responsibility, which was building relationships with high level executives in their customer base, as well as vendors and suppliers. And he really didn't do very good at building those relationships either. He just was kind of below average.
Mm,
Actually, I think he might have been the son of the owner, and was just kind of
yeah.
positioned there
Mm.
and really not very good at it. So hence they got him a sales coach. Anyhow, I worked with him for probably 3 or 4 months, and he said to me, he's like, "Coach, put me in. I'm ready to go out. I got this." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" So he told me that he was going on this sales call with his sales rep, and he was going to practice everything that we learned, and he was going to, do great. And he told me who the customer was. And for the sake of this story, or this, let's say the customer's name was Grumpy, and my client was Jim, because I
Mm.
know Grumpy. He's this mean old man, and I'm thinking, you're going to go out and try your new skills on, Grumpy. And so anyhow, I was a little worried. He went on the sales call, and here's what happened. He's sitting there, his sales rep's right here, and he didn't say a word. His sales rep is asking good questions, uncovering needs. Grumpy's smiling, they're getting along, and Jim's sitting there thinking, why did you think he was grumpy? He seems like a nice guy. And the sales rep was doing famously. Jim wasn't saying a word. He was just being a good sales leader and letting the sales rep take the call. And all of a sudden, Grumpy turns to Jim and says, "So, what do you do?" And he was like, well, and he looks behind Grumpy, and on the wall is this picture of Grumpy standing there with two fish in it, arms out in front of a big boat. The fish are all the way to the ground, grinning, and Jim's like fixed on this picture behind Grumpy, and he's like, "So what do you do?" And Jim's like, I build ships." He said, "What do you mean you build ships?" He said, "I build ships. I build partnerships, and I build relationships." And it was
Wow.
at that point that Grumpy and Jim, started building their ship together. So I tell that story because Jim calls me on the phone. He's like, "You're not going to believe what just happened." And then when he told me about the relationships and the partnerships and seeing the ship on the wall, I'm like, I am stealing that. And
Uh,
do you mind if I write about it? So I ended up writing a chapter in a book with Stephen Covey and Ken Blanchard on shipbuilding. And I just love the concept. So I went a little crazy, and I started diving into what makes the difference in relationships and partnerships, and how can you be proactive and continuously build those that are important to your success. And I've done a lot of research and I've put together many programs around it. So for those salespeople or sales leaders out there, a strategy is shipbuilding. It is making a list of those relationships that are most important to your happiness and your success. And it could be personal or professional. And start thinking about tactically, what can you do to be proactive and intentional on building trust, building rapport, um, kind of reciprocity, giving and taking, and really building stronger partnerships and relationships that will last a lifetime, like a ship does when it's built.
That's amazing, and I think a good part of it is even leadership, right? Which is
Yeah,
a
so
part of it,
there are
right?
over 500 words in the dictionary with the word
Wow.
ship in. So ship like it could be stewardship, citizenship, leadership, partnership. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And it's all positive and it's about building. But in order to be a good shipbuilder, you need to be intentional. And in the book, it does list, 6 or 7 different areas to concentrate on and some exercises. But first thing I say to people is just take a few moments and write down those. And they could be people that you haven't talked to in 20 years.
Hmm.
What can you do to rekindle that relationship or reach out to them and thank them or let them know that you're thinking of them and they had impact on you and you just wanted them to know? I mean, there's so much that we can do in a virtual world and in this time to work on those relationships that matter most.
And that's what I was going to ask you as my last question before we summarize the interview and come to where people can find you. uh, the retention part of it is my favorite, because I think that's where you get great business, you exponentially grow, and you feel really good about what you're doing. You're not that guy or not that company which is going out of new people, not getting good reviews, and you don't believe in yourself.
Hmm.
How do you, if there's a salesperson or a sales leader out there, how do they actually go about the process of maintaining these relationships with previous customers or customers they've just finished projects with for now, and maybe in the future they will do business again and get referrals out of? Is there a process or any language words communication?
Well, I would say the number one retention strategy for companies that we see is used to be called business reviews, right? So you don't just sell and move on, but you're selling and you're staying connected because part of your program or your offering is there's a pre-scheduled check-in or business review that's going to take place 30 days, 90 days, every every year, but it might change in when it's delivered. But business reviews where you're not just talking about how great you are, but you're talking about the impact that you've had on that customer's business, and keep kind of reminding them of that in a non-selling way.
Hmm.
And then the other piece, I believe, is, and I look back at my clients over the years, they're my friends. And maybe that's just the way I did it. I mean, I'm down in Florida visiting, and we were on a little bit of a travel trip, and I just left a couple that I helped sell their business, and they're retired now, and they're our friends, and we've stayed in touch, just to stay in touch. I'm leaving here and going to stay with a lady who was my largest client for 8 years, and it was a $3 billion company.
Wow.
But we stayed friends, and that's part of shipbuilding.
Hmm.
So retention and retention, maybe they're retired now. I'm not going to get anything out of them, but they're going to refer me, and um, it just feel like I've had impact on their world and on their life. I've stayed close to that instead of sell it and move on.
Wow. All right. That's pretty good, Krista. So the question that I'd forgotten was about hunters and farmers, though I kind of
Hmm.
understand it. Some people, somebody who's 18 years old watching this hasn't wrote all the good books. Can you tell them about who the hunter is, who the farmer is, and then where do people find you? How do people get in touch
Sure.
with you?
Yeah, so hunter farmer is a term that's been used over the years to describe the differences between sales people and perhaps their skills. one is not any better than the other. And in different organizations, they just might require more of the hunting skills rather than the farmer. So think of hunting as kind of the aggressive, going out, excited about the kill, hunting, right? And farming is the one that enjoys nurturing or gathering or taking care of customers. Now, when you think about the CPR model, you need to have hunting instincts for conversion, and then you need to have the farmer instincts more so for retention, and then both instincts for penetration. And where you can find me, you can find me socially under Krista Moore in LinkedIn. Also, Krista Moore author page in Facebook is where I post a lot of my shows. I do a talk show most Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, and I'm starting to interview a lot of people around their purpose and their passion, kind of what they were doing when they were 10. And that's actually my second book. I'm working on that right now. But if you go to kristamore.net, it's a new landing page, and that's the best way to get connected with me. And I'm primarily focused on workshops and retreats for learning and development.
There we go, Krista. It's a pleasure. It's amazing. And I just wish that, we continue to have these conversations, because the stories that you shared, they are very inspiring. They're very touching. It touched me, especially your own story of how you helped your dad out. That's so personal, right? And that was so sweet. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I'll speak to you again.